Greetings, Jeremy Sutton here from PrecisionPrinciple.com, and today I'm coming to you again from Makloganj, India. Today is day one of the intensive yoga course, and so far we've done the morning yoga sessions and the philosophy section, and it's pretty interesting so far, so good. We've basically covered the introduction of yogic philosophy, which is rooted in Indian Vedic tradition. So maybe from the Indian Vedic ground grows the flowers or the plants of the yogic tradition. And so some of the important points that he mentioned today are that, of course, Om, the syllables A-U-M, or often represented O-M. What is Om? Well, it turns out Om is everything. And actually, in this philosophic tradition, it actually is literally everything. What do I mean? Well, A-U-M starts with A, then O, M. So, Om. This covers a guttural sound. He claims the O is a labial sound and the M is a nasal sound. So here in this one syllable, we have a single word that supposedly encompasses all of the possibilities of vocabulary. Whether it actually does or not is a debate for another time, but following this tradition, that is the argument. And so, representing all possibilities of language, this sound actually goes beyond that, and this sound represents the basis for everything. It's the vibrational frequency that underlies everything. It's the sound of the Big Bang, you might say. It's the sound of everything that we're doing. So, Om is everything. And in this tradition, a word and the thing that it points to are not separate. So this is quite a bit different from a lot of Western philosophy where we have a word that is a signifier, and like apple, and it points to the signified, an actual apple. But the word and the apple are not the same thing. Well, in this tradition, a word cannot be separated from the thing that it points to. So Om, it doesn't just represent everything. Om is literally everything in the sense that the word can't be separated from this. And so that's why a lot of mantras and a lot of this word can be used for mantras or meditation and a number of other things. We start our philosophical discussions each day by chanting Om 3 times and then ending the day by chanting Om 3 times as well. And so that is kind of the first thing we went over today. Next, we talked a little bit about the culture of India and the culture of yoga, because the culture of India is really the ground from where yogic philosophy, yoga culture arises. And part of some important parts of this are that India is a Vedic tradition. That is the oldest text that it kind of draws on are the Vedas. And part of this comes the idea of that there is no beginning and there is no end. So this culture always existed and maybe it always will exist. Now this is important when we get to the topic of karma, which karma is a very popular word in a lot of both the West and the East. And karma is action. So anytime we do anything, there is karma. Karma is action. And so karmic yoga is the yoga of action. Now this has 2 important parts to it, because anytime we do something or have a karmic action, there are 2 parts of it. There's the immediate effect, that is, if I'm thirsty and I drink some water, the immediate effect is that I have quenched my thirst. But then there is also a residual effect, we might say, that for example, maybe I remember where I got the water from, or that I remember how I felt, the feeling after drinking water when I felt this way. Or juice, for example. A juice, the residual effect is that this juice is delicious. So that residual effect is sometimes known as samskara. And samskara, this residual baggage that we get from our actions, is a problem. Because this baggage leads to more karma, more action, right? And so the problem with this is that we can accumulate samskara even right before we die. And if we do that, we have this residual storage of samskara, then where does our karmic action come back? Because karma is could be cosmic justice, you might say. Everything that comes around goes around. So how do you justify that, some people do bad things and get rich, and some people live great lives and live poor and miserable lives. So how do you justify this? Well, in this tradition, karmic justice, and ultimately, in this never-ending, no ending and no beginning, what happens if we accumulate samskara right before we die? Well, the answer in this tradition is we're in a cycle of rebirth and death, and rebirth and death, and most of us never completely rid ourselves of the samskara, and as a result, we are in this never-ending cycle of life and death. And this cycle, I'm pretty sure, is known as samsara. Now, here, yoga and Buddhism, because they both come from the same region and many similar ideas, there are a lot of similarities between these two. So ultimately, the question is, how do you get out of this cycle of birth and death and birth and death? And the Buddhist tradition, of course, says enlightenment. Enlightenment comes from liberation. Well, in this tradition, the yogic tradition, there are different schools of thought, but in the karmic yogic tradition, it's all about presence. It's all about developing presence, and in that way, when we are completely present, we don't accumulate samskara, so the tradition goes. And the practice of yoga is about cultivating this presence throughout many parts of our lives. And on a side note, Patanjali is the one who really popularized yoga the way that we know of it now. And his most famous writing is, maybe it's not even written down, but I'm sure it is now, the Yoga Sutras. Now, the Yoga Sutras are supposed to be very precise sentences that convey the central teachings of yoga to us with as few words as possible. And there are, I think, 197 Yoga Sutras, and only 3 of them talk about asana. Now, the asana is the body practice. So in the West, everyone's doing yoga. What really everyone is doing is one part of the whole yogic practice. There are 8 branches of yoga, and the physical body practice is only the 3rd branch, the asana practice. That's why all of the poses end with asana, tadasana, uttanasana. They all end with that asana, because that asana is the posture. But only 3 of the 197 key points of yoga deal with the asanas, right? So there's a lot more to it than just cultivating the body stretches. It's also about cultivating the mind. It's also about cultivating the way that we behave when we act with other people. Are we good people or bad people? Because obviously the bad actions are going to cause us to accumulate samskara, which is going to keep us in that never-ending cycle of birth and rebirth, I guess, both same. So, the yogic lifestyle, the yogic philosophy, and especially in this class, Ashtanga yoga is known for being a more comprehensive style of yoga that focuses on all 8 branches. The point is, ultimately, enlightenment, if you were to take this path to its philosophical conclusions and its actual realization. Whether that's possible or not, I can't personally attest, not being an enlightened being, of course. But the point is that it goes beyond just the physical body postures. And so through the breathing, through the meditation, through the cultivation of awareness and presence in the moment to moment, this yogic lifestyle, this yogic tradition, yogic philosophy, gives us a way to hopefully be present in as often as possible, to live life in a way that we are completely engaged with it, so that even while we're talking, we don't have that voice in the back of our heads. We're not always having this secondary thought process, so that our entire being is really fully engaged with whatever it is that we're doing while we're doing it, whether it's reading a book, being in a conversation, doing elaborate stretching postures, playing music, or anything else that we might do as we go. So that is the majority of what we talked about in about a very brief summary of 2.5 hours of philosophy. But nevertheless, that's what we did here on day 1. We got more to learn this afternoon, but I'm just going to do these talks every day around the same time, because that's what I have the best break. So here's day 1 of the yoga practice. Thank you for joining me, and again, until I see you again, until you see me again, keep learning, keep growing, and have a great day.